Hello, I'm Bas Hamer from PossumLabs, and today I'll be talking to you about some information to know about contributing to the PossumLabs DSL project. Alright, so the things I care about is that code is pretty. I'm one of the people who will be primarily working on this for the foreseeable future, and I like my life to be enjoyable, and I enjoy working with pretty code. I also think it is important that things are named well, and that's why these two are number 1 and 2. Dry, don't repeat yourself, look it up if you have to, is important to me. I try to follow it to the best of my ability. Solid ends up being also a core way of how I try and design my code. And the fifth point, which may surprise you, is that I treat comments as danger. I do not see comments as a substitution for pretty code or naming things well. I treat comments as something that notates, hey, there is something non-intuitive here, and I haven't found a way to solve it in a way that the code looks intuitive. So if you look through the code, you're not going to find many comments, and when you do find comments, it's usually because there's something pretty weird going on. And there are some exceptions to this, of course, right? We all are striving for these things. We're not always going to get there. First of all, there are manager classes. Now, if you ask anyone what does a manager do, most people can't really answer that. Sometimes they don't do anything. Ideally, they don't do anything, but sometimes they end up with a bunch of odd jobs. And this is kind of the same idea with the code, right? When you have a bunch of odd functionality that needs to be associated to a particular entity, then that kind of ends up in a manager for that entity. Another place where I break some of the patterns is that I love extension methods. I like making my code pretty, and you'll see that they are in a number of different places in the code. So yeah, if you hate extension methods, you may want to avoid this code. When it comes to adding features, the only thing I really care about is that we keep the tests running. Right? People are going to rely on this thing. People want their tests to be stable. People don't want to be surprised when they update a package that the shit starts breaking. So whenever we add functionality, I'd like to try and keep things compatible to the best of our ability. Yeah. You can also add extensions, right? So PossumLabs or DSL is an open platform. It's under the MIT license, which is the easiest and most permissible license that I've enjoyed. And if you want to create extensions, you do not have to put them inside the PossumLabs repo, right? So if you want to create a mobile library or a library for interacting with ServiceNow or Salesforce or anything like a third-party system like that, feel free to do that. You can do whatever you want with it, and you can put it in whatever repo you'd like, with whatever license you feel like. I don't care. I'm more than willing to help you out. So one of the things that you'll find is that there are unit test projects and integration test projects. Unit tests are not necessarily unit tests. It's just tests that are easy enough to run as part of a build. Integration tests require Selenium. So that's kind of the separation. Mostly there's a limitation of a build service I used at some point in time, and they would automatically run my unit test, which is great. But they pretty much would run anything that had tests in the name. So that's why I ended up with integration tests in the end, because that was something it wouldn't trigger. And of course I couldn't run the build on their service using Selenium. Also, one of the things you'll notice is that a lot of stuff doesn't have quite the test coverage you'd expect. That's because it's the fourth time for me to build a system like this. And part of the reason why I built this is because I definitely didn't want to build it, a fourth time. So I built this for different people, different companies in the past, and it was pretty successful, and people keep asking me to build the same thing over and over and over again. So I decided, well, okay, I'm just going to build one version that I enjoy, that is something I can reuse at future engagements. So that's why some of the things were built relatively quickly, because I already built these things like 2 or 3 times before. So you don't really feel the need to put a lot of test coverage in place. So there is no 100% test coverage. There's no expectation that this will ever happen either. And the last thing to know is that there be dragons, right? There's going to be parts of the code you're going to find which is dealing with future projects, future functionality, extension points, or things that are just not covered in tutorials at this time. Right? It does a lot more than the tutorials document. And some of these features, I'm not sure if they're going to have a wide appeal yet, and they may not be supported at some point by the documentation in the future, but you're definitely going to find some things that may be a little bit confusing. Right? I've had plans as to what PossumLabs or DSL would lead to. So far, I've only been wrong. Every time I have a plan, I find out that now that's not going to be the way it is. So I do know it's a start. I'm going to keep playing around with it. I enjoy working on this code, but I don't know where it's going to go. But we'll probably talk about some of these things in detail when we actually get to the source code, and we'll just walk through each of the different projects to talk about what is in there, what they do, and things to be aware of. Feedback is awesome. I love feedback. I don't mind when people are unhappy with certain parts of code. I'm more than willing to listen to that feedback and see if we can accommodate and improve things. Even if you just want to contribute things that don't work, right? Like here's a bunch of HTML patterns that don't work and I don't know how to write an XPath for them. That's fine. I can still add those in. I can then see if we can start supporting them and see if there's existing XPaths that have to be opened up a bit or can be made more powerful, or if there's new XPaths that need to be added, and possibly those may have to become part of like a separate group of XPaths to add, similar in the same to the way that we deal with Bootstrap support. All right, I think that wraps up everything. Thank you very much for the interest. And now we're going to be talking about the individual projects.